Welcome to Wiregrass Daily News Sports. This is your daily look at sports in the Wiregrass and the Southeast. Dothan Wolves on 96.9. The legend producer Phillip Jordan breaks the news, covers the games, and talks to experts in the Wiregrass and Southeast. And now, Phillip Jordan.
All right, joining me today on Wiregrass Daily News Sports is somebody you guys are familiar with, Mr. Ben Stanfield. You can check him out, AM News, over at WTVM there in Columbus, Georgia, and on the Troy football broadcast over on ESPN Plus. He is the color analyst over there. Ben Stanfield, I appreciate you taking the time and coming on the show.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And always good to talk to the folks in the Wiregrass. You know, it's home. That's where I grew up and lived. What's been 90% of my life now. And I miss it down there. I really do. And so it's always good to catch up with folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Me and Ben we're talking great things about the Ross Clark Circle before we hit the record button. It's great down here. So
it's a project that never ends, right?
Somebody should write a book about it one day.
It's funny.
It'd be a New York Times bestseller. I guarantee it. But anyways, so, before we got into Troy, and we're going to talk about the Georgia State win. Hey, look, I feel bad. I picked Georgia State last week here on the show.
A lot of people did. It was quite a statement win for Troy, though, over the weekend.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But, before we jump into that, the ESPN Plus deal. Let's see if I can talk here on the show today. The ESPN Plus deal. How did that all get started for you?
So the television landscape is expanding rapidly. I mean, we're all aware of that in college football. And one of the neat things with ESPN Plus is that there's so many more opportunities to broadcast games. And so Troy's on what we would call TV, but there's a difference if you're on ESPN, say on cable, they would call that linear, but then on ESPN Plus is called, the streaming side. But you can watch every game now. And I would think as recently as 5 or 6 years ago, you couldn't do that. And so, you can remember back in the 90s, big teams in SEC would be on TV, maybe 8 times a year out of 11 games. There'd be 2 or 3 games where you couldn't even just be the radio, or you could go. And so anyways, over the past 25 years, we've come a very long way. And now folks like Troy and the Sun Belt Conference have been huge beneficiaries of that. And so they're on TV every weekend. And so it was a great opportunity for myself and many others to jump in the broadcast booth. And let me tell you, it's been a lot of fun. I really, really enjoy doing this. I'm the color analyst on Troy's ESPN Plus football broadcast. And it's been quite a blast jumping in and doing that.
Yeah, I could tell watching the broadcast. You and the play-by-play guy, Will Colmeyer, y'all have a blast up there in the booth when y'all are calling the games.
Yeah, we do. And so Will's been doing this a long time, and just a consummate professional in the booth. And so our first game together kind of came to be in an interesting manner. They needed a fill-in for the Appalachian State Troy game at the end of the 2019 season. It was the last game of the year. Troy was in a rough spot. They weren't going to a bowl game. App State was actually in the top 25 at the time. So my first game had a top 25 team. And so Will and I got paired together kind of on the fly. And, man, we just instantly hit it off on air. And we've been working together ever since. So that's, this is, I guess, year 4 or 5 now. And it feels like it's been 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, we don't want to talk too long about the Chip Lindsey era there at Troy. I actually was at that game, and somebody told me, said, Ben's doing the game color, and I pulled out my phone and pulled it to ESPN. I said, "Oh, there you go." So
wow,
yeah, that was cool. That was not a good day for Troy, though. I do remember that.
It was tough, and I mean, if we're grabbing the bull by the horns here, a lot of folks talk about when Chip was the head coach at Troy between Neal and John Summerall. Chip recruited very well. it just didn't translate into victories.
Mm-hmm.
And so, ultimately that's what it's all about. And so, but Chip's a nice guy, and he's up at North Carolina now doing some good things on that staff, and with Mac Brown. And it's a new day for Troy football, because things have translated into wins, and there's been a bunch of them here in short order since John Summerall has taken over this program.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about on Saturday. Like I told you off the top, last week on Fridays, me and the guy Matt Lowe, we do a pick episode, and I picked Georgia State. I looked at it, I said they're going on the road. Their quarterback Darren Granger's really good. Their running back Marcus Carroll too as well. But man, that Troy defense, they came out and they shut them down. Just what's your overall thoughts on Troy's 28-7 victory over Georgia State?
Well, I tell you what, this team feels a lot like last year's squad. Okay, so what you've got in the books right now is a tight Sun Belt Conference loss to James Madison, who is a really good football team. And I tell anybody who will listen to me, hey, look, not only is that the best team in the state of Virginia, they're probably the best team in the Sun Belt right now, if we're being honest. I would put them and Troy at the very top of the list. Georgia Southern's got a great football team this year too, and a lot of folks had Georgia State looped in there as well. And Georgia State, let me tell you, has got a great quarterback. They've played really well this year. Troy's defense just was able to zero in and shut them down. And it was kind of the statement game that this team's been looking for. So if you go back last year, they finished the year 12-2. They lost the opener to Ole Miss in a game that they were kind of in, but kind of not, and then lost that heartbreaker to App State. Well, kind of the same difference this year. The score out at Kansas State is not going to show it on paper, but Troy was in that game for a long time, and just some weird things happened and blew it up really fast. Then also you had a tough loss to James Madison by 2 points and missed the game-winning field goal late in that ball game. So it sets up very similarly. What I felt Saturday night watching this team play in Atlanta against Georgia State, a good football team, was it felt like the Marshall game last year when Troy was at home and Marshall came to town, who had just beaten Notre Dame a week prior, and Troy got a statement win against Marshall and then took off from there. And so that's very similar vibes. Defense has gotten a lot better through the season. The running game has gotten a lot better. And so when Troy can run the ball consistently, I don't think anyone left on the schedule could beat them.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Kamani Vidal. What is it now? 19-3 with him if they go 50 yards or more with him.
Yeah, and then I think Troy's won like 12 games straight. I don't know the stat here, but I'll be careful with this. But when the team goes over 100 rushing yards, I believe they've won 12 straight. So, I mean, keeping the ball on the ground, moving the ball on the ground is a big deal for this team.
And then last week in the press conference, Coach Summerall did talk about like the negative plays. How they really should have beat Western Kentucky worse than they did. It shouldn't have been as close with the negative plays. Where were you on Saturday on that? I feel like they did a better job of that. I know Gunnar Watson had the interception, but it seemed like they were a little bit better in that department.
Well, and Troy had some interceptions too in that game. Some big turnovers. Ransall had, I believe, a big pick in that game, and so it just you mix some turnovers with some good rushing attempts, and you can really set yourself up for a win. I just feel like the defense was able to. I mean, they're the MVPs of the show, and did have a late touchdown that kind of pushed that thing into what I call clinch territory. The game's over with, and so I was real impressed with again just the running game and that defensive shutdown effort, because Troy's got some dogs on defense, and I mean these guys are ball players, and it's not the same squad as last year, but they're coming into their own, and that was probably the fuel they need to see it all gel and come together. A couple of games in a row now. You mentioned that Western Kentucky game. They were able to get out of that one alive, and that's a pretty good football team. And then, like I said, go on the road and beat Georgia State. And I think that they should have another good weekend with Arkansas State coming to town.
That drive at the end of the game was championship level, in my opinion, because they held the ball for over 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Kamani Vidal scores a touchdown. Because, it's 21-7. Georgia State at that point when Troy got the ball, said, we get a stop here, score a touchdown, kick an onside kick, maybe we can tie the game up. They don't get the ball until 6 seconds left, and then Kamani Vidal puts over top 28-7. I saw that. I said that's what championship football teams do. They close it out. They don't let you get the ball back.
Yeah, and you see some of those great Alabama teams through the years that won championships. They were able to, have an 8-9 minute drive in the fourth quarter and just really just squeeze the life out of you like a python. And that's what we saw Troy do. You're absolutely right. Joe Craddock, the offensive coordinator for Troy, has talked about that too. He said, used to I wanted to put up X amount of yards, wanted to put up X amount of points. He says, now I just want to win. And however we have to get that done is how we get it done. And so it's like you said, they saw what was on the clock. They were able to run the ball effectively, sit on the clock, and burn a ton of it at the same time. And Joe Craddock's been able to pass that attitude on to Gunnar Watson. It's all about team ball. Nobody cares about stats on this squad. It's just, if the stats come, they come, and that's great. But these guys want to win. They got a taste of championship football in a big way last year, and I think they don't want to be anywhere else on the totem pole anymore.
In last year's team, it was all about the defense. Carlton Marshall led that group. This year I was kind of interested how the offense be, because I felt like not like the defense was going to be bad, but maybe the offense just needed to do a little bit more. And Gunnar Watson this year, I watched him play. I think he's played well. Like I said, threw in one interception. He's been sacked a lot, which I know that offensive line is still gelling. They're still kind of figuring it out together as a unit. Because I always say offensive line is like a team within the team. They've got to work together to perfectly gel. He's thrown his 61% this year's 9 touchdowns, a little over 1,300. What's been your thoughts on Gunnar Watson this year?
He's just a proven field general, and you're right. He has taken some sacks, and he took some last season too. If we're being honest, that line has come in, got some new guys in the mix. You got Eli Russ up front in the center, and he's come in from Oklahoma State, transferred in, and quite frankly, great football player, but it just at times early on didn't feel like maybe they were on the same page in some instances, but it looks like that is starting to correct itself. And the only way you fix that is by going out on the field and playing football. And so, you could have practiced for forever and you're going to see the same guys at practice every day. But once you get 11 on 11, different jerseys on, and that sort of thing, and an actual gameplay, that's where you find out tendencies and strengths and weaknesses, and that's just part of the growing process. So I think if you lined Troy up against James Madison again right now, I would give the edge to Troy in a game like that because of offensive line play.
Yeah, I think that was such a close game. I mean, those two play, it might go 5-5 if you put 10 matchups between.
It really might, yeah.
Receiver, and that was another thing with Troy too. Jabri Barber, and he was playing great last season before the injury. I mean, he had a tremendous game the other night, over 100 yards. And then Chris Lewis, just throw it his direction. He will go up and he will find a way to go get it. That Troy receiving core, I think, is not being talked about enough, but they've been really impressive, especially those two.
Yeah, I had the radio broadcast on the other night. I was driving during part of that Troy game, and Chris Blackshear, who is the radio sideline commentator for Troy's radio broadcast crew, Chris Lewis had dropped a pass in the end zone, which was very rare. The dude's been catching one-handed dimes all season, and Blackshear made reference in that comment that he said, well, he had to use two hands to try to catch it, and maybe not quite used to doing that this season, so because he's had so many SportsCenter spectacular catches. But he brings a huge element to this that opens up so much for this offense. And then, like you mentioned, Jabri Barber, Dothan's very own, who got hurt last year against Southern Miss. And at that time, when he went down, Troy was matching Tennessee. All right, Tennessee had an explosive offense last year, and Troy did for a long time as well. And so things kind of got different through the season for them. They really kind of had to turn into a ground and pound team in the season last year. But at the time when he got hurt, when Jabri Barber went down, Troy led the nation in explosive plays, tied with Tennessee. So to tell you how versatile they were up to that point, and things changed after that injury. But Jabri Barber has responded well from that injury and has had a great season. And I mean, probably no more people more excited about that than us, his hometowners, to see a Dothan guy really just showing out.
Yeah, it's been great seeing, especially when you saw the stat line on Saturday. So let's look at this weekend's game with Arkansas State. Familiar to SEC folks, head coach Butch Jones over there. They started off pretty bad. They won last three, and their quarterback Jalen Rayner this past Saturday against UMass, 20 of 25, 383, and 6 touchdowns. I was looking when he plays, they're 3-0. They win. They play winning football when he's there. Their defense is not good, though. Defensively, they're like 13th in the Sun Belt total defense. So you feel like Troy's got some opportunities here to really get some of those explosive plays on offense. What's your thoughts going into this game with Arkansas State?
Well, they made so much press off the start of the season when they played Oklahoma, and gave up 73 points, didn't score against Oklahoma to start the year. And what we've learned since then is Oklahoma's a really good football team. Arkansas State didn't quite have it figured out. But credit to Butch Jones and that staff at Arkansas State. They've done a nice job turning it around, because 73-0, I mean, can be a demoralizing scoreboard really for a couple of games. But they had a rough time with Memphis the next week after that, where they lost 37-3. But like you said, made that change at quarterback. And they've played really well since then. Wins over Stony Brook. I was really impressed with the win over Southern Miss. And that game was, I believe, in Jonesboro. So Southern Miss had to come up there. So it was a home game. But, I mean, Southern Miss, not a bad football team at all. And as I saw that score developing through the night, I thought, oh, okay, Butch Jones, I see you. And so, and then last week, the win over UMass. And so I think this is going to be a pretty competitive football game. I think a lot of people, like we said, saw that start to the season for Arkansas State. I mean, you give up over 100 points and you only score 3 in the first 2 games. A lot of people are going to, go pay attention to something else. But I think Arkansas State is worth paying attention to. And really on this Western side, they're on the come up. You got Texas State on the Western side of the conference, who's playing great football with former Auburn quarterback T.J. Finley. And then Louisiana's playing great ball as well. South Alabama's no slouch either. And Troy's a good football team. So really, and then ULM always brings this weird factor to the conference too. So it's kind of anybody's show right now on the Western side of the Sun Belt. And Arkansas State's trying to jump in there and say, hey, listen, we still got a dog in the fight.
Yeah, I was looking at it, and going to the year, I was like, okay, it's Troy and South Alabama, and then there's everybody else. But you're right, now it's jumbled up. There's a lot of good teams there, so it's going to be interesting on Saturday with that game. Of course, and Ben, you'll be on the call there on ESPN Plus on at 3 p.m. So everybody go get ESPN Plus if you do not have it. That's free advertisement for ESPN Plus here.
We certainly appreciate that, and excited. Listen, anytime we get to go and do this, and we haven't done a ton of games this year, but anytime we get the chance is a great blessing. And I just always remember my roots. Started out as what I called a street beating reporter at WTVY, and then worked at WDHN at Dothan for a long time too. And I'm just proud to be where I'm at every single day. And so it's good. Every time we go is like the first time, and so we're pumped about Saturday.
Josh Pate always says also the grind is a blessing.
Yeah, it is. And, it's that's a pretty perfect way of looking at it. Yep.
And real quick before I let you go, of course, it says you're there in Columbus, so not far from Auburn. The Auburn team coming off a near upset win over Georgia. And I look at it as this one thing. Yes, if you're an Auburn fan, Auburn supporter, part of the Auburn program, you wanted to win that game, obviously. But also look at Auburn talent gap. It's obvious between Georgia and Auburn. But the fact is they were in that game, had a chance to win it, shows the coaching of Hugh Freeze. And I think that should give Auburn fans hope. What's been your thoughts so far, 5 games in with Hugh Freeze?
Well, you're right. I mean, quarterback play has been kind of interesting for Auburn. And excuse me. And so that offensive line play has been a factor as well. And so if you look at what Peyton Thorne did on Saturday against the number 1 team in the nation, I believe he had 9 incompletions, but I mean they were money balls most of the time. In the hands, on the numbers, you can't put them any better than that. you can't make receivers catch the ball. And so that's a little bit of what Auburn dealt with in that game. But to also credit that to Georgia's great defense, too. Georgia still is the number one team in the country. But Auburn had probably the best preparation for the Georgia Bulldogs that we've seen since maybe 2017 or so when they beat Georgia, and so it was a tight game. What I saw, there was a lot of promise from Hugh Freeze. And listen, I know they lost the game by a touchdown there, but not necessarily the worst thing when you got 60 outstanding recruits or so in the stadium. And you can go to every one of those guys and say, listen, you just witnessed what we did today. I mean, we had number one on the ropes, probably should have won the game. What can we do with a talent like you in the mix? And so, I mean, Hugh Freeze, a good salesman, never lets an opportunity go by like that. So I am fully expecting that's been said quite a bit. What could you do for this team to get us over the hump? And so it's going to take a little time. The program did kind of shift backwards a little bit the last couple of years, but they're getting it in gear and moving in the right direction. And they got a great football facility here. I actually live in Auburn, and so I see the program quite a bit, and I know some guys on the staff. They got their heads and their hearts in the right place, and the rest is going to follow. It just takes a minute, and sometimes that's not fun. And I tell you, Auburn folks aren't really used to it taking a minute. You remember when Terry Bowden came in the early 90s? He won his first 20 games as a head coach. Then you had Tommy Tuberville came in and was in the SEC championship game in year 2. Now, in the first year, it was a bit of a struggle for Coach Tuberville. But then look ahead to Gene Chizik. He won a national championship in year 2. Then Gus Malzahn went to the Rose Bowl in year 1. And so, should have won a national championship. So it's always happened fast for Auburn head coaches. And so I think it will for Hugh Freeze too. I really look for next year's team to be a really good ball club, but I think they're going to win some games that will surprise some people. And I would quite frankly circle that LSU game that's up next on the schedule. Auburn's off next Saturday, then they go to LSU. It's a night game. But they broke the streak last time they were down there 2 years ago with Bo Nix. And so I think that could be an interesting ball game. Because LSU's got Missouri this Saturday, and Missouri is no slouch, pretty good physical football team. So we'll see. There's some silver linings there. I think a bowl game's in their future and this season. And maybe if the ball bounces right, it's a bowl game in Florida instead of somewhere north of here.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you see that performance like they had against Georgia at Jordan-Hare, I'm just going to throw it out there. The Iron Bowl's there too. And we know what that game is like in Jordan-Hare Stadium. So
Alabama's not as good of a football team as Georgia. I'll be honest with you and say that. Georgia, I think, is 1A. Alabama's 1B in the SEC, and there's no Brock Bowers on that field anymore the rest of the way as well. And so I think that guy is good enough to be a tight end invited to the Heisman ceremony. Maybe to win it, too. And if I had a vote right now, I would be thinking Bo Nix's direction out of Oregon. But Brock Bowers, I think, should be sitting in New York in December as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be glad he's going to be in the National Football League next year. That's going to be it. Right. A
lot of people in this town.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, it's been fun. I kept you a couple minutes longer than I said I would, but it's been great chatting it up with you as always. Talking Troy, talking some Auburn, just talking ball with you. If the listeners and viewers want to check you out, where can they find you? Where can they find all your stuff?
So weekdays, I'm on, if we're talking Central Time, 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. on WTVM and Columbus. If you're up in like the Eufaula area, I believe we're on a lot of the cable systems there. So northern part of the Wiregrass, and so down into that region. And so, that's where I'm at. I wake up in the middle of the night, go to work, and then I'm home by noon and transition into football in the afternoons. And then, like you mentioned, this Saturday we'll be on ESPN Plus calling Troy and Arkansas State. Big homecoming game for Troy, too. So it's going to be a great week.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Everybody tune in to the Trojans and Ben calling the game on ESPN Plus. And Ben, again, this has been a lot of fun, and I hope we can do this again sometime down the road.
Oh, absolutely. And, keep up the great work, and I appreciate you having me on today. Thanks so much.
And thanks to Ben Stanfield for coming on today's episode of Wiregrass Daily News Sports. And real quickly before we get out of here, just a couple of news items and things to go over before we get out of here and get you ready for Friday, which Friday show will be with Matt Lowe as always. The portal window, NCAA has approved some changes there. It will shrink the window at the number of days student athletes can enter into the portal. 45 days throughout the year, divided different by sport. Each will do it differently. In football, there'll be a new 30-day window, which will be in the Monday after the FBS Conference Championship games. Any player playing in the college football playoff will be given an additional 5-day window in January. The second window will happen in the second half of the month of April. For basketball, they will have a 45-day window that will begin the Monday after Selection Sunday. New NCAA rule bans unofficial visitors from taking professional photo shoots while on campus. But Nicole Auerbach from The Athletic pointed out that nothing will be stopping parents for taking pictures of their kids with their device and stuff like that. Just there won't be official photo shoots by staffers. And I've read some stuff. I forget who tweeted it out on Wednesday, but they said they really hated that. Anyways, it just added more to it. So now, if you're on the official visit, you can do it. Unofficial won't be doing it anymore. Let's jump into some high school football. The latest rankings are out. We're going to look over who all in the Wiregrass are in the top 10. In 7A at number 1 is Central Phoenix City. That means a lot because number 7, Dothan, plays them on Friday night. Of course, you listen to that on 96.9. The Legend. Other teams in Dothan's region, Auburn is sitting at number 3 at 5-1. Enterprise is at 8, and the team Dothan just beat Baker sits at number 10. In 5A, the only team in the Wiregrass area that is ranked here is Charles Henderson at number 9 at 3-2. Number 1 in 5A is Gulf Shores. Ramsey at 2, and they gave Auburn all they wanted this past Friday. In 4A, Andalusia sits there at number 1 at 6-0. That's the only team in our area here that is ranked. In 3A, the only team we got there, we have HA sitting at number 5 at 5-0 on the season so far. Now, I want to go back real quickly. In 5A, Carroll did receive votes, and they're playing Eufaula this Friday night. So that should be – it's always a fun game when those two get together. I always look forward to that, checking that out, seeing what's going on between Carroll and Eufaula. And 2A, don't really have any teams outside of Cottonwood that are ranked. Cottonwood, number 9, enters the rankings. They will be playing Ayrton in a big game. We had Coach Harrison on Tuesday's show. Hadn't checked it out. Please go check that one out with my interview with Coach Dustin Harrison there. Cottonwood. Goshen did not get ranked, but they did receive votes. And then in 1A, Leroy is at number 1. Elba comes in at number 2. They did receive one first place vote, and teams receiving votes there, Florala and Brantley. And that is a look at the latest rankings in high school football. Now let's look at the schedule for this week, week 6. Some may say week 7, but we reference that first week as week 0, as some others do. So this is week 6 for us. We've got 3 games in the area on Thursday night. In 3A Region 2, you'll have Providence Christian, who's 3-2 at Northside, who's 2-3. That'll be out there at Riphew Stadium. In 2A Region 2, 3-3 Zion Chapel will be at 4-1 GW Long. In 1A Region 2, 1-4 Kinston will be at 1-4 Pleasant Home. On Friday night, 7A Region 2, just mentioned it, the 5-1 Dothan Wolves will be at the 5-0 Central Phoenix City. See if Dothan Wolves can get a big win there and knock off Central Phoenix City on the road. Remember, it was a very close game last year when they came to Dothan. 4-1 Enterprise will be at 2-3 Prattville. In 5A Region 2, 3-2 Charles Henderson will be at 2-3 Rehoboth. 4-2 Eufaula will be at 3-2 Carroll. Like I said, that should be a fun game to watch. 1-4 Greenville will be at 4-1 Headland. In 4A Region 2, 6-0 Andalusia will be at 2-4 Geneva. Slocum at 1-4 will be at 1-5 Dale County. In 3A Region 2, Daleville 2-4 will be at 2-4 Ashford. 5-0 Houston Academy will be at 1-4 will be at 4-1. Strong had their first loss of the season last week, losing to Ayrton. New Brockton at 1-4 will be at 2-3. Pike County. In 2A Region 2, Abbeville 1-5 will be at 0-5. Sampson. 3-3 Ayrton will be at 4-0 Cottonwood. 2-3 Wicksburg will be at 0-5 Geneva County. In 2A Region 3, Barber County 1-4 will be at Goshen, who is 4-2. 1A Region 2, Brantley at 3-3 will be at 5-1 Georgiana. Elba at 5-0 will be at 1-4 Red Level. Houston County, who's 2-4, will be at 4-1 Florala. And then in Independence, you'll have Pike Liberal Arts 1-3 playing at Lighthouse, Georgia. Then in AISA, Abbeville Christian 1-5 will be at 5-1 Chambers Academy. And finally, just some stuff to check out over the next couple of days, TV wise. Not going to go over the whole college football schedule for Saturday. Me and Matt go over the big games on tomorrow's show, so you'll get that kind of TV layout for that. But college football on Thursday night, you'll have 0-4 Sam Houston State be at Liberty, who's 4-0. That at 6 o'clock on the CBS Sports Network. West Kentucky 3-2 will be at Louisiana Tech 3-3, 7 o'clock over on ESPNU. In the NFL, you'll have the 0-4 Bears at the 2-2 Commanders. That's 7:15 on Amazon Prime. Then on Friday night, you'll have Kansas State 3-1 at 2-2 Oklahoma State. That's a 6:30 game over on ESPN. Nebraska at 2-3 will be at 2-3 Illinois. That's a 7 o'clock game over FS1. And do remember on Saturday, the Braves will be set to play their game 1 of their NLDS series. Do not know who that is of this recording, but that game will be on TBS. That's going to do it for this Thursday edition of the show. Once again, thanks to Ben Stanfield for jumping on the show. Be back Friday morning, bright and early, and we'll be previewing the college football weekend with Matt Lowe from Field Level Media. Remember, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. Podcast available at WiregrassDailyNews.com or wherever you get your podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. And if you leave just 4 stars, you're just a straight up hater. You can always email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com. Talk to you guys tomorrow.
Thank you for tuning in to today's Wiregrass Daily News Sports. Make sure to tune back in tomorrow for more of the sports you love in the Wiregrass. Check out the podcast at wiregrassdailynews.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Continue the conversation and connect with Phillip on social media at PJordanSEC.